In this video, we are going to overview what information should be included when writing up survey results in a slide deck report. In a separate video, we overviewed all of the information that should be included in a survey slide deck proposal. We will review that a little bit here, but not in great detail. So if you haven't, you may want to go back and review the survey slide deck proposal video before continuing with this one. So the slide deck we are looking at here is the completed proposal for a survey for OP Surf Apparel. Once the data has been collected and analyzed, you would be able to fill in the rest of the report. I would encourage you to decide on the design and formatting of your report first. The style you use can change how everything displays and fits on the page, so it is a good idea to do that first, so that you won't have to worry about going back later and reformatting everything. So of course, in PowerPoint, you can go in under Design and try a bunch of different design strategies and add in graphics and do various things to make it look a little nicer, more professional. However, for this particular video, we're just going to leave this one with the blank formatting so that we can really focus on the content. First, we have the title page. You can fill that in and add some graphics to make it look professional. Next, the table of contents. You will need to do this last and fill it in. You'll want to identify at least the key sections, the main sections of the report, so people can easily navigate to them as needed. Then, there is the executive summary. This is a very critical slide that you will need to fill in, but not until after you complete the rest of the report. The executive summary should include a bullet point or two that explains what the study was, in this case, a survey of college students at CSUF about their perceptions of OP, and then you would want to identify the most important findings and bullet point them here, highlighting some key statistics. So I can show you some examples. Here's one example of an executive summary slide. Note that it includes the objectives, some overview, and a summary of the finding. So I liked this summary because it overviewed, kind of summarized the entire report. It does include some key statistics. So that's one example. It is a little busy and not maybe as pretty as it could be, but I did like that it included everything. Other examples oftentimes will just focus more on the results and the key insights, and that's okay if it's going to be at the first slide of the larger report, because you'll get to see the rest of that information. However, if you were going to use a slide just as a standalone piece that you would hand out, then you would want to include at least a little overview of the method and the study design. So those were just a couple of examples of how you might write up your executive summary. Those are also posted in the lesson for this week along with some others, so that you can get a feel for how you might fill that in. Then these following sections of the report could have been completed as part of the proposal. If that hasn't been formally written up, then you would need to fill it in for your final report. But in this case, all of the background for OP, the OP study is filled in. So you have the background, the management goals, the purpose, the research objectives, and all of the elements of the method are filled in. So you can see all of that in here. So it's going to be important for you to review this in trying to write up your results so that you understand the context for the study and what you should be looking for. So after your measures slide, we are now back to slides that cannot be filled in until after you have collected and analyzed your data. This first slide focuses on the sample or demographic statistics. For small survey studies, it is important to ask some key demographics or other characteristics that represent your audience. For example, if you are interested in surveying people between the ages of 18 to 35, or people who live in a range of certain cities, you will usually want to ask questions such as age and city of residence, so that you will have data that will confirm that the people you surveyed satisfied your population parameters. This can also help you identify any potential bias. For example, if you ended up with disproportionately younger people, closer to 18 than to 35. The OP survey had gender as its only demographic question. This question was specifically included so that comparisons could be made between men and women. Typically, however, you'd want to include at least a few demographic questions just so that you would have insights on the nature of the people you sampled. So you might ask things like age, ethnicity, city of residence if that's relevant. Now, this data will just tell you about your sample so that you can judge how well it represents the population you are interested in. It is important to stress here that a small survey study is not going to be large enough to trust to tell you the actual demographic breakdowns of your population. You would need to rely on larger marketing studies for that. So in this study, they were also interested in making comparisons between people who had heard of the OP brand before and people who had not. That isn't really something we would call a demographic statistic, but since brand familiarity was identified as a key characteristic for comparisons in this study, statistics for that should also be included in this sample or demographic statistics section right here. Now, sometimes the demographics are reported at the beginning of the results section as you see it here, and sometimes at the end. It just depends upon the nature of the report. For short surveys with small samples, it is helpful to report this information first so that readers can keep it in mind as they review the rest of the results. We can take a look at some examples. Here is an example of a demographics slide. You can see gender reported and I think origin and their status, employment status, age range. Now each of these could be reported on a separate slide or they could be reported in one place. Now I kind of like to see a little bit of narrative provided in addition to just the charts, but still this is a reasonable summary. Here's another example, a breakdown of some demographics from a survey. And here's another one that just provides the same information in narrative format. Again, I kind of like a combination of both. So more of these examples are also in the lesson for this week, but this is just to give you an idea of how you might report the demographic statistics for your sample. And again, it may not just be demographics. There may be some other key questions or factors that are important for kind of understanding who it is that you surveyed that you want to kind of report up front. Following the sample or demographic statistics, you will then begin reporting your main results under a results heading. You might want to organize your results in different ways, but the standard default is typically just to report it in the order the questions were asked. It is good to include clear headings for this information. Again, you will want to report appropriate descriptive statistics, frequencies, averages, and standard deviations when appropriate. Many reports will just include charts and tables, but it is better to include some narrative that can help the reader interpret the data. Again, we will look at some example slides. This slide is from a sample report that I included in this week's lessons materials. You will see here that it includes a chart, so it's a graphic depiction of the results, but it also includes a narrative explanation that kind of helps the reader understand what it is they're looking at. So it summarizes a key finding, it lists what the question was, and it provides the actual statistical data relevant to that particular question. So this is a good example. There are many other examples provided in this week's lesson to give you some ideas for how you might display and report these results. So the results section of your report is going to take many slides to fill in, not just the one that's included on the template. So you will fill in your data for all of the questions, and note as well that in addition to reporting and summarizing the data for each survey question, you also are going to want to make some comparisons of your data for the key groups based on the differences you might anticipate. Keep in mind that in this OP study, the differences, the comparisons that were identified to make were for gender and brand familiarity. So you would want to go through each question and make comparisons for each of those combinations. And there's a couple of different ways that you might organize this. First, let's take a look here at our survey. So this is the OP website survey, and it has the 7 questions, which is short, but easier for this exercise. So these last 2 questions here are what we summarized in the sample statistics or demographic statistic information. So now here is the real body or meat of the survey. So we have this first question: after reviewing the website, how likely it would be to explore it further? Then you have website ratings, improvements, how well does it communicate the product, and how likely is it you consider purchasing OP in the future. So you want to summarize results for each one of these questions. So you can do a slide for each one. Now, once you do that, and that you do your general results, then you might want to make comparisons of these results by brand familiarity and by gender. So we have a couple of different ways of doing that. So here we are back in our report. We can take a first slide of the results and title it Explore Further, or however we want to head it. But this first slide might look at the results for that first question: how likely are we to explore the website further? Now, then we have some options. We can take this first question, the general information, and then report the breakdowns by gender. So now, first we look at overall how likely were people to explore, and then were there differences in likelihood to explore for men or women? Were there differences by people who'd heard of the brand before or people who didn't? I kind of like this organization because it sticks with the same topic, exploring the website further, and then just looks at different perceptions, people that might have different perceptions about whether they would explore it further. Then you could go on to the next question, website ratings, and talk generally about the website ratings, and then website ratings by gender. So you can do it that way, and that's probably the way I would most recommend it. But you could also go through and just reorder like this and do general explore further, general website ratings, so do the overall for each question, and then do a whole section just differences by gender, explore further, website, all through the questions, and then differences by brand, and go through all the brand differences. So I hope that's clear. But I'm trying to say that when you do comparisons, you can either do general compare, or you can do all general first and then a whole set of comparisons for each set. Now, just really quickly, I wanted to show you a slide example of how you might make comparisons in your data. So for example, this slide is looking at differences between employers and students and how they think about whether they think improvements are needed to ensure college graduates gain the skills and knowledge they need. So what they found is that employers are more likely than students to think improvements are needed to ensure college graduates gain the skills. And so then they're comparing here employers versus students on entry-level positions and employers versus students on advancement and promotion. So again, you see the question stated, you see the comparisons, but it gives a nice little summary that explains what the difference was. In this case, that employers were more likely to think that those improvements were needed. So again, there are some more examples throughout some of the reports that I posted and within some of the other lessons, but just as an example. After you've reported all of your results, the next section is your implications and recommendations. This is where you identify key insights that the data offers relative to your research objectives and larger purpose of your study. Be sure to connect the implications of your findings to recommendations that you feel they support. Not all survey reports will include an implications and recommendations section, but I want you to, as it is arguably the most important thing I want you to learn in this course, which is how to use research to support and guide strategic decision making. So this may also take a couple of slides. Last is the limitations. Take some time to really consider the many limitations of the study. Some limitations are true for all surveys, and some will be specific to that particular study. Consider every aspect of the method, the type of data collection, the type of survey study it was, the sample strategy and size, the procedures, how the data was collected, the measures, the survey questions that were asked. Review the texts and lessons which detail both the uses and limitations of surveys at length. Being able to critically evaluate both the value and limitations of different studies, again, is a key goal of the course. And that concludes this overview of survey results. Thanks for watching.